Hi, Jersey Dude here, back with part 2 of Big Patch Small Machine. I mentioned that my machine stitches about 11.4 by 7.4. Now, if I were to decrease the size of this patch height-wise to 7.4, it would only be about 8.3 inches wide. There's no way that an 8.3 inch wide patch on a 30-inch shirt is going to make any impact at all. Not the kind of impact that Batman should make. So, we have to figure out a way to make this thing big enough. How are you going to make this thing big enough? There's only one way to do it, and that's to sew it in pieces. Yes, we were going to make one big patch out of a bunch of little patches. How do you go about doing that? First of all, you have to look at the design and find out if there's any way to chop this thing up. I'll tell you right now, one thing that this has in its favor straight away is that the background is black. You can hide all kinds of sins and transgressions in black, and you can also hide seams. That is the biggest advantage you have here, is the black background. Nothing really shows unless you've got your microscope out and you're really looking at it close. And even then, it doesn't really show up that well. So, the black background, with that in mind, start looking at how you're going to divide this thing up. By dividing it up, you can choose the larger areas and maximize their height to your stitch frame. I've moved over into MBX now. You can see our design here. And as I was speaking of previously, you have to start looking for rivers or divides that make sense. You can see areas in this that you can divide out. Some of them are pretty obvious. The two sides of the moon obviously lend themselves to being divided off. The segment here, down on the chest, that is its own distinct area. You can probably look here and see, yeah, the head itself is a distinct area. And if you push it out to its limit, you can really see that each side of the neck and each shoulder and upper chest sort of looks like a separate piece. That's how you have to start looking at the designs. This one, yes, as I mentioned, I did some modification to some of this. I split some of these pieces apart so that the neck was separate from the head and that the left shoulder was separate from the right shoulder in this area here. I did a little bit of work to the design itself to make it conducive to splitting it up, because I could see how I was going. I look at these things now with that in mind right from the start, because I know to make it any size at all, it's going to have to be split up. So it's a bit of a mind bender to actually see this thing and watch it blow up into pieces, but watch it go. Look at that. There are your stitch out sections. Each one of these stitched out separately makes the whole. There it is, all back together again. The redo and undo keys are absolutely crucial. You really need to learn to use those. Or go back, or return, or cancel, or whatever it is in your software that achieves that. Those you really need to get used to using. So, we have this thing split up into pieces. How did I go about that? Well, at one point, I had to choose and make a rectangle. Let's turn it into a box that we can use, and then we can size that box. I'm going to unlock the proportions, and I'm going to make it 11.3 by 7.3. And there is the box into which I can place different segments of the drawing. And I can bring them over and I can size them so that they will fit. I make sure that they will fit within that frame I've created. Now, with all of these things sized the way they are, this entire patch is 13 by 11.5. That makes a pretty good impact on the shirt. If I divide it up, these pieces equally fit within the stitch frame very easily. You can see this piece here is 6'7" by 4'5", let's call it. That very easily will fit in that stitch frame. In fact, it doesn't really fill it up much at all. I don't have to use my 11 by 7 frame, my big one. I can use one of my smaller stitch frames. I have one that's 7 1/4 square, and I can easily fit this piece into a square one. So the opposite shoulder, or the opposite part of the moon, I can obviously do that. The head segment is only 6'2" by 3.5. The shoulders, yeah, very easily 6'6" by 5. Those will easily fit in my square 7.25 frame. Oddly enough, the section that has the least impact is actually the biggest. That one's 8 by 3'6". I will have to stitch that in my big frame. But you can start to see now how this is all going to come together as a bunch of separate pieces all put together to make one large patch. Cool.